Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Terrace Talk. Looking ahead to this weekend's championship fixture between Norwich City and QPR. Norwich, of course, travelling to the capital. I'm your standing host for this week, Conor Southwell. Adam Harvey has got a well-deserved week off, so I'm stepping in. So hopefully there's no major issues on this broadcast, but I'm sure there won't be. Thankfully, we've got a brilliant guest to guide us through. So I'm delighted to welcome Conor with one N from Hoopsa to offer some QPR insight ahead of this weekend. Conor, great to see you. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Where to start? I mean, it's. I mean, we were speaking a little bit off camera. It feels like it's maybe not been the start to the season you guys expected, because you ended so positively, and there was a lot of people talking about probably you guys and Sheffield Wednesday joined up really for the respective jobs that Marty Cifuentes and Danny Royal did at those clubs. They looked doomed, really, didn't they? Sort of halfway through last season, at the point those managerial changes were made, both obviously stayed up. So looking at the league table, I sort of maybe sense a little bit of, from the outside looking in, I would imagine there's probably a fair bit of disappointment about how the campaign has started. So I recognise this might be quite a long answer, so feel free to talk as much or as little as you wish. But what has happened in that subsequent period from the season ending, with all that positivity, all that optimism, all that sort of upward momentum that it looked like you guys had, to where we're sat now on the 4th of December as we record this, with you guys again looking probably at a bottom three. Well, you are in the bottom three, and hopefully you're not, but it feels like maybe another campaign of survival.
Yeah, exactly. Disappointing start to the season for sure. It feels like deja vu, to be honest. We find ourselves in the same position as we did a year ago. Obviously, this time last year was when Marty Cifuentes came in. As you said, we completely U-turned with him at the helm last season. End of January, February time in particular. From then onwards, we were really good, really solid. Our January signings helped to bolster what was a fairly poor squad. And we ended the season with a bang. The last home game, we thrashed Leeds 4-0. It's a sign, hopefully, to us that we're going to go in and be a bit more competitive next season. But this season has not gone exactly like that, and it's due to a mixture of things, really. We had quite a lot of incomings in the summer, 9 incomings, average age of 21. Not a lot of those players hit the ground running. A lot of them had never played in England before, let alone the Championship. As I say, very, very young players. And the other thing that didn't help is we had a few players unavailable. So Elias Chair missed the sort of first 9-10 games. A lot of the sort of senior players that have been there for some time that you would hope to be there to help these kind of new players blend in just weren't available. And then once some of them started coming back in, they started getting injured again. So we're missing quite a few key players still. Chair came back in for a couple. He's now out injured. We've got been missing Kenneth Powell at left back. Jake Clark-Salter, who's a player who the season before last had a really poor injury record for us, and they kept him out of the off of the medical table last season, has now reverted to his old ways, and he's been absent as well. So been missing a fair few players. It's meant that Marty has had to play players in all sorts of positions. It's been changing formation. But like I say, the recruitment has been a real hot topic. We yet again went into another season with only 2 forwards available, one of which we picked up in January, Mickey Frey. He only scored 1 goal since January, so that didn't feel like a player that you were going to be relying on. And then Jan Seller, who we got from Lugano in the summer, only just scored his first 2 goals for QPR last Wednesday against Cardiff away from home, and they both came at once. He got 2 goals in that 2-0 win. So some signs of optimism, but it's been a very frustrating start, as we say, and the recruitment has been the real kind of topic of debate. We got a new CEO in January, and he's 26 years old. And he went real data heavy. That was the approach. We're doing everything on data. And, the data's not suggested that many of those players have been too good until this point. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Norwich, another club who are trying to do things by being data led and trying to use that to inform some of their particular recruitment decisions, but others as well. It's interesting to hear sort of increasing numbers of Championship club going in that direction. And I guess that probably brings us to the next question, really, which is when you have this conflict, and we've seen it at Norwich at time, particularly in the last 2 years as well, where recruitment has been so heavy. I mean, how much of the burden is on Marti Cifuentes for what's been this start of the season, and what I guess is the feeling on him at this moment in time when, like you say, maybe the fingers are being, or it sounds like the fingers are maybe being pointed in other directions and not necessarily at him, because I'm sure he still has credit in the bank for what he achieved last season.
Yeah, that's spot on, to be honest. I mean, there has been some criticism of Marty. It does feel like I think, you know, he deserved to be able to implement a style of play after he kept us up last season that he wanted to implement. So we've seen a lot of him trying to play out from the back, a lot more possession based. The trouble is the players that we've recruited just don't seem to suit that system at all. And so whilst I think a lot of people are pointing at the CEO and the recruitment that we've done as the issue, there has been a little bit of maybe you're trying to, you know, fit players into this system that's not working, and that needs to be maybe abandoned. And we've kind of seen that over the last few games. They've started to get rid of the playing out the back and going a little bit more direct, and we're having a little bit more joy of it. But on the whole, you know, like you say, there's a lot of goodwill in the bank for Marty, and I think the majority of fans recognise that there would, you know, at the end of the international break, there was discussion of, you know, maybe replacements being sounded out because the 6 games before that were really poor. But there's no point in sacking, you know, the manager that kept you up last season if the next manager is going to struggle with the same crop of players. So I'm really glad that, you know, over the last week or so, we saw him start to pick up some results, got that second win. You could see the relief on his face. But yeah, I think most of our fans are really supportive of Cifuentes still.
Just while we're sort of discussing recruitment generally, one player I wanted to ask you about is Jonathan Varane, who Norwich City were interested in January. Someone that I think they would have liked to have signed if all of the stars aligned. Obviously, that didn't happen. He then signed for QPR this summer. As you mentioned, it's interesting to see 2 clubs that are very data heavy, sort of identifying very similar players. What's his start been like in the Championship? Because I think he's one that Norwich fans have sort of tried to keep an eye on. Certainly, there were a few eyebrows raised when he signed for QPR. So yeah, how's he done in sort of the opening few weeks of the Championship season?
He struggled a lot at first with the physicality of the league. It felt like he was struggling with the physicality, the pace. He made some really rash decisions. He got himself sent off in, I believe it was Sheffield United away. But since then, he's kind of come back quite a different player, and we're starting to see that he's looking a lot more physical. He seems to be getting up to the pace of the game. And he's actually been quite impressive over the last sort of 3 or 4 games. So he's definitely someone that's improving. He's getting up to that level. Quite a physical player, but also quite tidy on the ball as well for someone of his stature. I wasn't quite expecting that from him. I do find it interesting, though, that you guys were linked with him too, because in the summer when I was looking at, doing my homework on Varane signing, I noticed, I don't know if you've ever used FB Ref, like the sort of stat platform.
Yeah.
On that platform, you can search any player and it tells you 10 other players that are the closest likeness to that player. And Isaac Hayden, who we had on loan last season, his number 1 comparison was Jonathan Varane. Wow. And obviously you guys had Isaac Hayden on loan the season before, right? So it kind of leads me to a more general point on this database recruitment approach, right? Which is, as you said, most clubs are going in this direction, and it does seem to be the way of modern football. That's what clubs are aspiring to do now. My general kind of doubt over it is, unless you have a bespoke data set that only your club has access to, what gives you the edge over other teams? Brighton, for example, all of their data is in-house. They're the only ones that use that. And we've seen the joy they've had in the transfer window over the last 5-6 years. But yeah, the fact that we were both linked to Jonathan Varane off of the back of both having Isaac Hayden suggests that we might not be using the most exclusive data around.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, it's definitely it's interesting to hear that. It's definitely a player that I think Norwich City fans will be keeping an eye on as he sort of develops and plays more Championship games to see if that's one that they missed out on potentially. Let's talk this season then, because I mean, looking on the surface, particularly recently, it feels like there's been a lot of draws, which and that seems like a championship wide thing this year. It feels like there's been way more draws than maybe previous years. Without delving into the stats, that could be completely wrong, but it's the feeling. You look at West Brom at the moment, you have like 9 draws on the bounce or whatever. So it does feel like that. And I guess that probably points to where the division is more broadly. It feels like lots of teams that are probably a little bit closer in quality than maybe we've seen in recent years. But does that offer you guys encouragement? The fact that it's not maybe what it was at points last season where you were losing games in succession and there was maybe a lack of competitiveness in those games. It still feels like you've got a foothold in games and you're still chipping away at points, even if, as you say, there's maybe been elements of it that haven't been that great and there's been major question marks.
I'd say yes and no, because it's good that we're picking up these draws. We seem to have tightened up a lot recently. It kind of reminds me of what Marty did to this QPR team a year ago when he first came in and sort of tried to build from the back a little bit, tighten us up, and then try and introduce goals later. That seems like where we're at the moment. And, you're happy that we're adding points to the board now. We lifted ourselves off of the bottom of the table. It's now 2 points from safety. So feeling a lot more confident in that regard. On the flip side, we're drawing games that are winnable. You come away from it going, how didn't we win that? Like Watford away, we had so many good chances, but we just couldn't finish our dinner. And, it feels like, are we going to get to the end of the season and be like, God, if you'd picked up 2 more points in that one, that could have changed where you are, So I really hope we don't kind of get to that point. But yeah, like I say, we've tightened up, so that's really reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some of your recent fixtures in front of me. I mean, it's 2 defeats in 8, and they were against Middlesbrough and Leeds, who are among the best in the division, certainly on the evidence of what we've seen so far. But draws against Coventry, Burnley, Sunderland, Watford, as you said, Stoke, who've improved under Narcis Palace, who are at Norwich. So, I mean, I'm trying to sort of come at this from a positive angle, but it goes into maybe what you said there. It does feel like there's now maybe a little bit more reason to suggest that the dial's shifting a little bit in terms of your performances, even if that hasn't quite translated into wins yet.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, you look at the Middlesbrough game was horrible, but then they went and thrashed whoever they played in the next game 5-1 immediately afterwards. So you do go, okay, you can take that a little bit from it. Leeds are Leeds, so we weren't expecting to go there and take anything from it. And they definitely owed us one after we thrashed them 4-0 at the start, at the end of last season, and more or less ended their bid for promotion. So I wasn't expecting much from that. So, but yeah, the rest of the results, you're picking up draws. Burnley, to go to a Burnley away and pick up a point, you're always going to be pleased with that. Sunderland, they've been in fine form as well, but that was a game that you kind of felt like, oh, we could have nicked something from that. And you turn one of those into wins, and the confidence that can give this team, particularly, we see that from the win last week at Cardiff, finally got that second win of the season. And we look like a different team away at Watford then, and Watford has been a really tricky place to go as well. I think Tom Cleverley, he's not lost at home since he became their manager back in March. So again, it puts that point into real perspective.
I mean, it does, and you speak about performances away from home. Why has Loftus Road been so difficult for you guys? It feels like this is probably a little bit more historic than just this season. I know there was a real struggle last year, wasn't there, for wins? I know you ended up with 7th, but I think it was the 4th worst home record in the division. Obviously, this year you're yet to win a game at home. What is it about Loftus Road that's proving so challenging for you guys?
I have no idea. There just seems to be no rhyme or reason to why we're so poor at home. It's been nearly, I mean, for as long as I can remember, we've not had an amazing home record, but the last 2.5 seasons in particular, like we're just so poor at home. It's been one aspect, maybe the run in the second half of the season aside, but it's been one aspect that Marty's not like ever been quite able to crack. We don't look that convincing at home. I mean, I would say more generally, it's probably just still down to a lack of strikers. Like I said, this point last season, we only had Lyndon Dykes and we had Sinclair Armstrong, a youth striker. They were our only options. A year on, we've got Mickey Frey, who's out injured, and Jan Seller, who's only just scored his first 2 goals last Wednesday. So I do think the fact that we don't have those forward options, I mean, we're starting most games with just a lone striker up top. You never see us start with 2. So I'd probably say that's like the key to why we're not performing as well at home. But other than that, it's a really hard one to work out. And it's one of those things where it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, because a lot of our fans are like, the atmosphere is so poor at home now, like people don't get behind the team. but it's also because the football has been really dire. It's, you know, it's like, unless you see something entertaining on the pitch, you're not going to be getting into it. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, well, exactly. I know post-COVID, Norwich had a really bad home record, and I mean they've just come off the back of a 12-month unbeaten home record that was sparked by a 3-1, I think it was, defeat to Blackburn, where David Wagner at the time was under huge amounts of pressure. So it can turn pretty quickly, and sometimes, as you say, there's no rhyme or reason as to why that is the case. Talk to us a little bit about the team then. I mean, you've mentioned maybe the striking options. I think when you think QPR, you think Elias Chair and the quality that he has. What are the areas that this QPR team can hurt opposition teams? What are the strengths of it at this moment in time?
I mean, that one's a very difficult one to answer because we're not
all
scoring
weaknesses. It's up to you. You take what you want.
We're not scoring very many goals. Like I say, we've tightened up in recent weeks. Paul Nardi in goal. We signed him in the summer to replace Begovic. He has been a real standout, one of the signings. He's kept 4 clean sheets in like the last 6 games. So he's been really, really impressive. 3 clean sheets rather. So he's been really solid, and he's definitely won us some points where we probably didn't deserve them as well. So I've been really impressed with him. Jonathan Varane, as we said, we spoke about him. He's starting to really come into his own. He's getting up to the pace of the game. Who else? struggling to think of any other standouts. But yeah, you know, I like I say, it's really that we're starting to be a bit more pragmatic at the back. We're kind of a bit more solid in midfield now as well. So, and yeah, if Jan Seller up front can keep up that kind of confidence that he's built up after getting his first couple of goals, then maybe he can be a threat on Saturday.
Final question before we sort of move to the game itself, and I asked you a couple about that. But QPR more generally, I think certainly the narrative from the outside, that's all I can speak of. You obviously clearly have a lot more knowledge than me, so shout if this is wrong. But I think the narrative has been relegation from the Premier League, and then almost a real struggle to kind of, not similar to Stoke, because I recognise they're very different case studies, but almost it feels like there's an absence of strategy. Feels quite harsh, but maybe that is the case. I mean, can you talk to us a little bit about what's gone wrong? Because Norwich, this is year 3 post relegation, so a lot of Norwich fans themselves know how difficult life can be once you drop out of the Premier League, and we all know that division isn't quite what it's cracked up to be when you get there and come down again. So, what has the years post Premier League looked like? Because it feels like a club that has maybe failed to sort of find what it wants to be or is trying to be a little bit.
I think absence of strategy was probably the perfect way to put it. We, for the last 10 years, had Les Ferdinand as director of football. And between him and Lee Hoos, who was the chief executive, there was just a lot of spending on the wrong players, a lot of different managers, not really been able to find that style of play. And, you know yourselves, once you lose that parachute payment money, then it becomes very, very difficult in this league. Paired with that is the fact that we've been paying off an FFP fine for the last 10 years and desperately trying to stay in the margin of where we need to be on FFP. So over the past few seasons in particular, that's really limited what the spending could be. And then when we have been able to spend some money, the spending's been wrong. So that's been a massive part of why we've not been able to kick on. In some senses, you think you do look at some other Premier League clubs that drop and then drop again. We have managed to stay in the division, but over the last 2-3 years, it really has felt like we're sort of starting to outstay our welcome a little bit in the Championship, and that maybe League One is calling. And I still think we're going to be in for a real battle for the rest of this season as well. So, new CEO came in January, as I say, and we're very hopeful that was going to be a new strategy and we'd have a really clear vision of what we want to be. But people aren't too crazy about him so far after the summer recruitment.
Let's look ahead to this weekend's game then. What are your feelings heading into this game? I mean, what have you seen of Norwich so far? Maybe that's a nice place to start. It's obviously a very different thing that they're doing now compared to last season. It's a very different team to the one that David Wagner brought to Loftus Road at the back end of last season. So, how much have you seen of Norwich? What have you made of what they're doing at the moment?
I mean, the main thing I've been noticing is that you just score a bloody lot of goals. You're the complete antithesis to QPR, and that makes me quite cautious of Saturday afternoon. No, I mean, Norwich and QPR always have pretty nicely contested games, I think. And I'm not surprised to see that, you're scoring a lot of goals. It seems like a really good attacking brand of football. And I guess I'm just kind of surprised that you're not higher in the table given the results that you started picking up. I did notice that your away record isn't as strong as it is at home. I think is it winless in the last 5 away from home? A few draws in there, but
Sounds about right. Yeah, sounds about right.
So that's, I guess, why you're not slightly higher. But yeah, like you say, it's the attacking sense that I've really noticed.
What sort of game are you expecting then? Because it sounds like we're talking about a team that scores a lot of goals to a team that's tightened up a little bit. So I guess we're looking at that battle, aren't we, really?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we did just play Watford, and they've scored a ton of goals themselves, particularly at home. And we managed to stay tight against them and give them a real game. I mean, I said on the scrimmage on Monday that my particular worry is out wide, and I know you guys have some pretty good wingers. So I think that's where we're going to need to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that we've made at home this season, because the amount of teams that have come to Loftus Road and pushed us as wide as possible, and we just can't cope with it. Crosses in from the wings, corners, we're pretty poor on. So we have tightened up, but that's where I'm going to be quite cautious of. I do think it would be quite a high scoring game. Hopefully we manage to be involved in that too.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the beauty is that Norwich are in a phase where they're still trying to learn a new style of play. There are individual errors. I mean, they've probably assisted the last 3 goals that they've conceded, really, because they've all been errors playing out from the back. So there's maybe a crumb of comfort for you guys that actually, if there is a team that can prevent them scoring goals, which is probably easier said than done with someone like Borja Sainz in the team, but if you can do that, then there will be opportunities at the other end for opponents. I think we've seen that as well. So it's going to be an interesting game, which probably leads us to the final question, Conor, which is, how do you see it going? Let's have your score prediction to finish the show.
I don't know why I'm going for this score, because we don't score goals, but I'm going 2-2. I just think it's going to be a bit of a goal fest. I'm hoping that after, a week off for the lads, after a busy week last week, that they've recharged a bit. Hopefully we might have a couple of players back from injury as well. But yeah, I'm hoping we really go for this one.
Top man, Conor, thank you very much for your insight. I mean, just finally, tell us a little bit about Hoopsa and what you do over there, and the type of content that maybe people can expect if they want to go over there and have a look. Obviously, we'll link it all, of course.
Yeah, sure. I do pre-match and post-match reactions for QPR matches over on YouTube. It's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. But there's other features on there as well. So I interview players and managers. I recently spoke to Mark Warburton, so maybe that's one that if people are interested in kind of wider championship content, they might be interested in. But yeah, if you fancy checking out my post-match reaction, then that will be up after the weekend.
Good stuff, top man. Conor, thank you very much. Thank you all very much for watching. Adam will be back in this, not this exact chair, but he'll be back in the hosting chair next week. So normal order will be resumed. Let's look forward to. I always look forward to a trip to Loftus Road, and it's going to be an interesting game, I think, for both sides. Thanks for watching. See you soon.